Transportation is a wonderful thing. The act of moving produce, people, and other assorted products from one point to another in a quick and efficient manner is vital to the expansion and stability of any nation. Transit routes are nothing less than the veins through which the metaphorical blood of a country flows. And of course, while discussing transportation, especially on the topic of public transportation, it's difficult to not bring up the island country of Japan. Now, Japan is no stranger to airline travel, and given the geographic location along with an abundance of ports, traveling by ferry is far from uncommon as well. But when you think Japan, you think trains, and maybe anime, or the declining birth rate, like high-speed rail with its aptly named bullet trains that carve a path across the entire archipelago. It always feels as if Japan is on the cutting edge, so it'll come as no surprise that Japan is once more on the cusp of innovation. However, there's just one very minor hiccup, which is where you come in. You've been specially selected for being, quite frankly, expendable. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anybody who looks quite so expendable in my life. It's impressive, really. But what purpose will you serve? Well, my little test subject, why bore you with explanations when I can simply give you a taste of what's to come? I've no doubt you've completely grasped your incredibly important task from just that collection of clips alone, but on the very rare chance you didn't, allow me to fill you in. You'll be taking part in the Freight Transportation Test, being tasked with traveling through the cryptic and distorted area known as the Doll's Liminal, a warped space split into layers from 0 to 399. You must enter and successfully come out the other side, though this is naturally easier said than done. Few test subjects have managed thus far, with most succumbing to the occultic threats that lurk within those claustrophobic corridors. If they're lucky enough, they might have even crumbled down at the bedrock, as the greatest of all threats, which is your target, lies at the bottom of the depths, and facing said threat without proper preparation is ill-advised. Unfortunately, the only real meaningful prep I can provide is that of the mind, as it's all you'll keep with you between trips. This game is a roguelike, after all, the first few runs of which are bound to feel confusing, which is what I'm here to mitigate. So let's get started. As previously mentioned, the Doll's Liminal is split up into a collection of layers. These layers are then grouped into different territories of sorts, with the danger naturally rising as one delves deeper, though there are exceptions. Be wary of layers containing the number 9, while also keeping in mind that the danger this snake route presents is proportional to the loot it might contain. But getting back on track, these territories will determine the types of dolls you'll encounter, and it's these dolls that you must remain wary of. Now don't worry, they won't hurt you, at least not physically. Instead, they'll rob you of your souls, chip away at your resistance, or destroy and relocate the items that are vital to your success. But most importantly, they'll drag you deeper down through the layers, which in a twist of irony isn't always what you want. So then, there surely must be a way of combating these dolls, or at the very least working around them, right? Well, indeed there is. These dolls, at least those that contain a soul and are actually of concern, will only approach when your back is turned. Keeping them in line of sight keeps them in line, and this even works through walls, which means proper positioning is vital to not getting jumped by the latest Funko Pop release. However, an immobilized doll isn't any less of a threat should one get too close, meaning they can become a barrier within doorways or cramped corridors. This is where the more direct method of confrontation comes into play. Every single layer will have some amount of drawers within it, indicated by these squares on the display. It's within these drawers that items, weapons, and ammo for said weapons can be obtained. These guns will utilize one of the light, medium, or heavy rounds in your possession, with some firearms outclassing others in terms of damage. Dealing enough damage to a doll will rid it of its soul, and in turn its ability to inflict harm, reducing it to an empty vessel. But ammo is often scarce and quite important for the final encounter, so it's best used sparingly. To make up for this, there exists other items, like this strange skull soul artifact that will completely disable a single doll for 30 seconds, with multiple uses if you're not unlucky. Or this purple herb, granting complete immunity to doll attacks for a measly 6 seconds. Best used in a desperate dash to safety. Of course, in moments where combat is all but required, it's best to keep it clean and efficient. Doll parts of varying rare metals can be used to upgrade held weapons to deal more damage, benefiting more from high base damage. White manju can also be consumed for a 1.5 times damage buff which doesn't stack. I found that out the hard way. Higher damage minimizes rounds spent, but it's not as if filling these haunted figurines with lead is a complete loss. Found on every layer will be an altar that will gain another small figure every time a doll with a soul is slain. Claiming these dolls will grant souls, which in turn increases total damage by quite a significant amount. However, you might notice the total number of souls is capped, and any overflow will end up within the item box, a useful place for storing items that won't always be on every floor. The way of increasing this limit is by possessing a stronger doll, which is where the single item you're sent into the depths with comes into play. The soul gun allows you to fire rare funerary shells, transferring your soul into an empty doll, which you'll either have to create yourself or be lucky enough to stumble across one. This body snatching gives a greater soul capacity, increased damage resistance, and even causes dolls of identical make and model to become completely passive. So choose wisely, as some dolls are more common than others in certain territories. Bit of a missed opportunity to have the different doll bodies have different abilities, but I digress. Additionally, your doll can be strengthened by applying makeup, which works much in the same way as the doll parts. A stronger base means an exponentially better growth, and also means attempting to upgrade your starting vessel is completely worthless. But what is damage resistance? Well, this determines how long you'll be able to remain in each lair, and in close proximity of active dolls, as they degrade the spatial stability of your current coordinates. Your flashlight running out of charge, alongside plunging you into darkness, will also rapidly decay this spatial stability, and can be recharged with a battery, or the outlets that sometimes appear on floors. Spatial stability hitting 0 will drop you deeper, but there's also a slightly more controlled method of descending by using the Daruma statues. Stare deeply into their cold, lifeless eyes, and pay close attention to the number on the floor, which indicates which layer is your next destination. And speaking of dropping layers, you might think that immediately after descending you should take in your surroundings and be careful to not agitate any dolls, but it's actually the exact opposite. Each time you enter a new lair, there will be a window of time in which every single doll is dormant, even being able to walk straight through them without any worry. That is, until the chime of the bell is heard, and the dolls with souls awaken. So during this short duration, it's important to stay calm, and sprint around the area like a madman, rummaging through drawers and kicking down doors like a deranged thief on too much of that purple herb, on the hunt for another hit. Just remember that when the bell tolls, it tolls for you. So that's all I can offer you in terms of advice. If all goes well, you'll reach floor 399 with at the very least a modest collection of weaponry to confront the overwhelming threat that is the Blood Trial Dominator. It's at this point that all planning and strategy goes out the window. You'll simply have to pray your journey through the layers has been bountiful, and that you don't hear the click of an empty chamber before the fight concludes. Calling this boss a DPS check doesn't feel quite right. Sure, there's an unstoppable approaching wall, but you'll have long since emptied out your reserves by the time it's any real threat. More often than not, you'll blast every last bullet in your possession into this cryptic abomination, only to despair when it does nothing, and be forced to toss yourself into the encroaching wall out of shame. Well, maybe not on the lower difficulties. A single buffed bullet is sometimes all it takes, but the total health of the boss will increase exponentially as the number ticks up. With that said, I've done all I can to prepare you for your little expedition down into the suffocating depths of the doll's liminal. So now it's up to you to navigate the floors and come out on the other side. I'm not expecting much, but perhaps you'll perform better than the usual disappointments. Do try to not get your soul stolen. We're hoping to set up this transportation route sooner rather than later, and more casualties is bad for our quarterly report. On that topic, I'd like to thank my patrons for generously supporting these videos, with special thanks to Mir Loon, Rody, Yuval, and Michael Bradley. They get access to videos a day early, along with a few other perks. Of course, I'd also like to thank you for watching this video through to the end. Perhaps, just maybe, consider liking and subscribing if you'd like to see more. But with that said, until next time.